Since we started a little late, we do have time for some questions to the panel, so over to you.
Geraldine Graydon from Autism Rights and Equality Alliance. I have a question for Edna Fitzgerald. Edna, your research, while excellent research, and what the NDA is excellent, and you probably know what I'm going to say, but the research lacks data on a specific population within Ireland, which is people with autism. And we know from our own research that we would estimate there's approximately 42,000 people in this country that have autism, and we don't have raw data even on them. We in Area consider the remit of the NDA as being a one-size-fits-all. In other words, that the church is too broad, and you are very restricted from doing specific research on various disabilities. And we wonder, why is there such a resistance to giving autism the recognition that it duly deserves, in order for their need for people with autism to be treated equally in this country, and also to inform the shape of social policy.
Thanks, Geraldine. Do you want to?
Geraldine, I suppose the NDA's research strategy when it started was very much that broad church kind of approach, which would have come from the Commission on the status of people with disabilities, which kind of said we don't want to segment people, we want to treat people together. But more recently, having moved through that phase, we're now looking much more at what are specific issues for specific groups, and autism is definitely very much up there on, for our next work programme. So it's not that we're ignoring it. The data issues, I know this came up in the Central Statistics Office when they were looking, would you put information on specific forms of impairment into the census, and they did their trials, and they said that if they put in autism they'd be putting in everything else. Now again, we talked to them, but I think there's some information in the National Disability Survey, and if we can get more out of what is in there. The other difficulty, I think, in terms of autism statistics is that very often, if you take the generation over 40, that you will find people who are labelled with autism tend to be the under 40s. It was called something else for people over 40. So it's hard to get an accurate prevalence study. And I know Anthony Staines in DCU is doing a piece of work in that area, and I think that may come up with good baseline information.
Thanks. Anybody else?
I'm just wondering, regarding when you mentioned the programme for government, I'm Fiona Cassidy of the Irish Thalidomide Association. I'm one of the survivors, and I'm just wondering, what is your evidence that the priority is given to things in the programme for government? Because I know that we fought tooth and nail to get our one line in the programme for government, and I'm just wondering, would you give us encouragement and reason to hope that we are slightly up the priority list if we're in the programme?
Well, in governments I've been involved in, and the current government, I think, and the immediate preceding government, they're the much derided programme managers. Their job is actually to manage the programme for government and to try and ensure that the work that departments are doing are working down systematically through the different things. Now, over a 5-year period, some things take more time than others, and inevitably some governments go out and they haven't fulfilled their programmes, and that certainly has happened in the past. If it's in the programme for government, there's a much better chance of happening, because there are people there whose job it is to make it happen. If it's not in the programme for government, it's very hard to get something that's new there, because there's actually so much to deliver on that's in a programme for government. I said that there is a system and a structure to try and work through, but the overriding thing, again, with everything is this, is the money. So that's the backdrop against which anything that costs new money has to be looked at. But if it's written in there, there is a system to kind of keep it on the table, and PQs and all that are used to pursue that. And the programme managers said, they're the people whose job it is to follow it up.
And if I might add to that, there's some very creative strategies around the world that are treasury neutral in order to generate wealth creation for people with disabilities, including particularly people with intellectual disabilities. So there's an imaginative space opening up for quality research that shows how this can be done. There's another question down here.
Hi, I'm Joanne McCarthy from the Disability Federation, and my question is to Professor Haberden. I thought that your presentation was really interesting and really challenged us to think outside the box, and I really welcomed it. I thought that you introduced some very interesting concepts such as social regulation, social reporting and the exclusionary effects, and I thought that it would be really timely for us to reflect on them, especially where we're at. I think we are at a point of significant transition in terms of disability services in Ireland, and that we do have some very, very good data such as the Congregated Settings Report, and obviously we should deliver on that. But and as we did know, there is significant money going in that 1.6 billion. So we have resources that we can realign. But we also have other data, such as the census, that shows that there's 171,000 people with disabilities who need services. If we look at realigning current services, that's going to hit about 51,000. But there's still a significant amount of people who are living in their communities, but are, I suppose, ineffectively institutionalised within their own homes. And I suppose, could you give us advice that at this point of transition, when we have such significant needs in terms of the congregated settings, we also have such historic needs in terms of those people who don't actually receive any or definitely inadequate services at present. What's your advice going forward then to make sure that we don't go down to create exclusionary effects in the new vision that we're creating? I know it's quite broad, but I think it's important for today maybe that we have that conversation. Thanks.
So Bjorn, please solve our problems in
Please invite me back.
Do you want to?
No, I'm not sure you actually had a question to me, but I liked your what you said, and I would certainly like to discuss the sort of what scope there is from exchange of ideas and possible collaboration. I mean, to be realistic, I think a lot of what has been mentioned here is also important issues in Norway, and I think also Jamie confirmed that even if things work well in Sweden in many ways, I think there's still scope for improvements. And clearly, if we compare Sweden and Norway, I think Norway has a lot to learn from Sweden. I think your personal assistant provision works much better than the Norwegian one. In Sweden, as I understand it, is much more rights-based than in Norway. Unfortunately, in Norway, too much is left to the discretion of the municipalities, and I think that's a big fault. But I think generally there is a major scope for more comparative research, more exchange of experience from different countries. So I look forward to that.
I think there's unmet need in every country.
Yeah.
So it'd be really interesting to do research on how we transition to try and absorb those unmet needs.
Thank you, George. There's been an emphasis, of course, today on policy and social funding, social support. But I think that we mustn't forget here, at any forum on disability in Ireland, that these services are largely dependent on fundraising and public monies and public support. And I think there's been a very bad perception out there recently, which of necessity we all need to counteract. I think the NDA would need to counteract it. I think the Federation needs to counteract it. And that is that there's an excessive amount of the 1,500 million or whatever that may be involved in administrative costs and not enough going to the frontline services. I think there's a huge job of communication and PR to be done there. And I think that will require an openness on how the funding is done and on the structures of the individual voluntary bodies and their funding systems and so on, salary levels, salary caps and so on. I think that if we require evidence on that, it will be the outcome of the election for the president, where Mary Davis, who has worked trojantly for disability, did not get the support. She certainly didn't get the support of the disability sector, as there are at least 300,000 people in this country with disability, and families and friends. Why was there no support there? The support, I think, vanished when her salary level and her involvement in other affairs that were generating income for her came to the fore. And my own personal experience as a fundraiser for the last 40 years has been that the public out there have become very, very suspicious of funding for voluntary bodies and how that funding is being spent. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks very much. I take it that as more as a comment rather than a question to the panel. No, but I mean it goes to the legacy issues of the past and how we unravel them to create a better future. And certainly, in a sense, the next panel will look at some of these issues because, of course, they've had to face these legacy issues. So we're eager to learn from, Martin Rutledge about that infrastructure of change and maybe how they've managed some of these legacy problems. Also, Brian Salisbury is going to be talking about precisely how we actually give control back to people in British Columbia, the positives and the negatives. And Pat Fratangelo, will talk to us about how service providers themselves their self-understandings have been transformed and how they actually deliver the services have been transformed.